We all know that feeling, right? That
Yeah.
moment just after you've made a tough call or said something difficult or, taken some action, and you kind of step back and there's this quiet little system in your head that starts chewing on it.
Yeah, the replay button.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The internal judge does the real audit on whether what you just did actually lined up with, well, what you believe is right or wrong.
And that auditing system, that internal judge, that's what we call the conscience. And it's the focus of our deep dive today.
Okay.
This is the fourth core faculty we're exploring in the self-alignment framework, SF, and its technical implementation, SI.
Right. So we're moving past just the idea of a conscience and looking at how you actually build something like it into an AI. Something verifiable.
Precisely. We're talking about translating that reflective judgmental function into a measurable objective component for AI governance, for really ensuring high integrity.
It sounds like giving the machine a way to do genuine ethical accounting. Not like feeling guilty, obviously, but structured judgment, coherent.
Exactly. Accountability. And just to remind everyone listening, let's quickly place the conscience back into that closed loop structure of SAFi.
Good idea. It's sequential, right? Fixed order.
Fixed order, closed loop, always running. It starts with the foundation, the value set, or you might call it the ethical profile. That's the principles the AI has to embody.
Yeah, comes the intellect.
Right.
That's the faculty that figures out how to respond based on the prompt and that value set.
Yeah.
It proposes the draft response.
Right. And that proposal, the draft response, goes straight to the will.
The gatekeeper.
The gatekeeper.
Ari.
The power to act. It makes that immediate binary will decision. Approve this thing, or is it a violation? Stop it right here.
Okay. And assuming it's approved.
The response goes out to the user. Then, and only then, we get to today's topic. The conscience. It kicks in after the fact.
Oh.
It's the judge performing the detailed audit of that approved action, comparing it against the value set, asynchronously.
Asynchronously so in the background. We'll definitely need to unpack that.
We will. And finally, the conscience's findings feed into the spirit.
The integrator.
The integrator. That's what ensures the long-term integrity, tracks ethical drift, and drives the self-correction. It closes the loop, feeding insights back for the next round.
So conscience is really that critical reflection point. It's checking if AI stuck to the spirit of the rules, not just the bare minimum, the letter of the law.
That's the core of it.
Okay, let's dig into that structure. You mentioned the will is like the executive branch.
Yeah.
Quick enforcement, hard rules.
Yeah, it's the immediate stopgap. It checks for obvious violations, things defined as absolutely not allowed. It's fast, reactive, but, well, blunt.
Blunt, right. It's a simple check.
It really is.
Yeah.
The will decision is basically a yes-no. Did we break a hard rule? So if the will is the executive enforcing the letter of the law right now,
Then the conscience is the judicial branch.
that's the analogy the designers use, and I think it works really well. The conscience provides the comprehensive, reflected assessment. It's the judicial review after the action's been taken.
So it moves beyond just, did we break a rule, to
Right.
ask what? Something deeper.
It asks, how well did this approved action actually align with the spirit of our core value set? That's where you measure the real ethical coherence. Are we actually striving for the good defined in our values, or just, not doing specific bad things?
Okay, but you stress that timing. The will approves, the answer goes out immediately, and then the conscience runs.
Yes. And this is absolutely critical for practical use.
Why? I mean, wouldn't it be better to have that deep check before sending the answer?
In an ideal world, maybe. But think about user experience. If the AI had to pause for, say, 5, 10, 15 seconds to run a deep ethical audit on every single response before sending it.
Nobody would use it. It'd be too slow.
Exactly. You can't build that kind of latency into the main interaction loop. Safety is paramount, which the will handles for immediate clear violations. But for the deeper alignment check, we need speed.
Okay, but here's the skeptical question then. If the answer goes out, and then the conscience runs its background check and finds, oh, this actually kind of undermined one of our core values, hasn't the damage already been done? Aren't we just logging a mistake after the fact?
That is the fundamental trade-off, and it's a very conscious design choice in SAFi. The will is your first line of defense against immediate, serious harm. If the draft response is dangerous or clearly violates policy, the will stops it. Nothing gets sent.
So the really bad stuff gets caught.
Hopefully, yes, that's its job. But if the response passes that initial safety check, maybe it's just ethically mediocre or subtly misaligned, SAFi prioritizes getting the answer to the user quickly. The conscience then operates asynchronously.
In the background.
In the background, it sacrifices that real-time intervention for the depth of the audit. It's about learning, comprehensive logging, and long-term correction.
I see. So the system acknowledges, okay, sometimes a safe but ethically meh response might get through, but the upside is that this meh response gets thoroughly analyzed.
Meticulously audited, yeah.
And that data is then used to make sure the next response or future responses are better aligned. It's investing in long-term improvement rather than trying for instant perfection on every turn, which would grind things to a halt.
That's it, precisely. The conscience does its deep judicial review without making the user wait. You get the immediate safety from the will and the deep corrective learning from the conscience. That balance is really the architectural heart of SAFi.
Okay, that makes sense architecturally. So let's get into the mechanics. What does the conscience actually look at to perform this background audit? What are its inputs?
It needs three main things from that specific interaction. First, obviously, it needs the approved answer, the actual thing that was sent to the user.
The thing it's judging.
Right. Second, it needs the original context. That means the user's prompt, maybe the conversation history leading up to it, and the internal state of the system when it generated the answer. Context is everything.
And the third thing must be the standard it's judging against.
Exactly. The third and arguably most important input is the value set. The persona's defined principles. And, crucially, as we'll discuss, the detailed rubrics that explain what those values mean in practice.
Rubrics. Okay, we'll get to that.
So the conscience basically holds up the action, the approved answer, against the standard, the value set, and its rubrics, considering the specific context.
And what does it produce? What's the output of this judicial review?
The output is a structured document called the conscience ledger. Think of it as the official report card for that interaction's ethical quality.
The ledger.
The conscience ledger. It provides a detailed value-by-value breakdown of the audit. It's the verifiable quantitative record, and it contains everything the next faculty, the spirit, needs to do its job.
Now, this is fascinating because you're connecting this very technical process back to some really old ideas about human conscience. This isn't just pulled out of thin air. There's a philosophical lineage here.
Absolutely. The concept of conscience goes way back, and the cider designers consciously looked at that history. Sometimes they do inspiration, sometimes they intentionally departed from it.
When philosophers talk about conscience, what's the general idea? Is it that inner voice?
Often, yeah. Philosophically, it's generally seen as a cognitive process. It's tied to your personal moral philosophy or value system. It triggers rational thoughts, associations, but also often strong emotions like guilt, remorse, shame if you did wrong, or peace if you acted rightly.
Okay. And I know Socrates comes up here with his demonic sign. That was a specific kind of inner voice, wasn't it?
It was, and it's a really interesting model the designers considered. Socrates described his daimoni not as a voice telling him what to do.
But what not to do.
Exactly. It was purely an averting voice. He only heard it when he was about to make a mistake, about to step onto shaky moral ground. It was preventative.
So it was like a break, basically, a warning signal before the act.
A proactive check.
Which, thinking about SAFi, sounds a bit like the will. The will steps in before the bad action happens, to avert it.
That's a great parallel. The Socratic model is very much about proactive intervention, and this idea of pre-action moral reasoning continues developing.
Right, like with Thomas Aquinas in the Middle Ages. His view was different again, wasn't it? More systematic.
Very much so. Aquinas wanted to integrate conscience into a rational framework. For him, conscientia wasn't some mysterious voice. It was an act or a judgment of practical reason.
Okay, so a process, not a thing.
A process of applying moral knowledge to a specific situation right now. And crucially, for Aquinas, conscience was primarily seen as a function of the intellect.
Ah, interesting. Part of thinking, not separate.
Right. It worked alongside something he called synderesis.
Synderesis?
Yeah, synderesis was seen as this innate spark or disposition, a natural habit humans have to grasp basic moral principles like do good, avoid evil. It's the general moral intuition.
And conscientia, the conscience, was applying that general intuition to a real-life choice.
Precisely. If synderesis is the basic moral programming, conscience is the act of running that program for this specific decision. And like the Socratic model, this judgment was generally thought to happen before or during the action. It's part of the deliberation.
So that idea, conscience as a proactive intellectual judgment, that was pretty dominant in Western thought for a long time, even influencing people like Kant later on.
Absolutely, whether it's Socrates' averting sign, Aquinas' application of synderesis, or later Kantian ideas about applying universal moral law. The common thread in the human models is that the moral check often happens before you act, or it's deeply tangled up with the intellectual process of deciding what to do. Humans can sit and think and feel that moral tension for ages before committing.
Okay, but SAFi explicitly breaks with that, and you said the conscience is its own faculty after the will. Why make that break? Why not follow Aquinas and make it part of the intellect, or have it run before the will?
It comes down to the realities of the machine architecture. It's not really a philosophical disagreement with Aquinas, it's a practical constraint. As you said, humans can deliberate proactively. We can feel that inner conflict before we act.
We can spend days agonizing over a decision.
Exactly. But a sequential automated system like SAFi, designed for real-time interaction, just can't do that.
It has to follow its steps. Intellect proposes, will decides, action happens.
Right. Intellect generates the draft response. The will makes the immediate will decision. If approved, the answer is sent. It's committed. Now, for the system to perform a deep, thorough audit of that action, assessing its nuances, its full context, its alignment with the entire value set.
It needs the final product. It needs the thing that actually happened.
It has to have the finalized artifact, the approved answer, in hand. You can only truly judge the full impact and ethical quality of an action after it's been taken. The machine must act before it can reflect on that specific action in detail.
So unlike a human who can deliberate beforehand, the machine's deep reflection must be reactive.
It has to be, in this kind of sequential architecture. The conscience faculty in SAFi is designed to capture that moment of post-action reflection. It's the machine analog to us looking back and thinking, was that the right thing to do? But instead of feeling guilt or satisfaction,
It generates data.
it generates objective, verifiable data in the conscience ledger. Guilt is irrelevant for an AI. What's critical is capturing the performance data accurately. And the only way to get that deep data without crippling the system's speed is through this reactive, asynchronous audit. That's the key structural choice enabling SAFi to balance speed, safety, and that continuous ethical learning.
Okay, so this asynchronous reactive audit happens, comparing the approved answer to the value set. And the result is the conscience ledger. You called it the report card. Let's unpack that. What makes it so detailed?
Well, it's not just a single grade. The conscience ledger breaks down the performance value by value. For every single principle listed in the persona's value set, the conscience faculty generates a specific entry in the ledger.
And each entry has, what, 3 key pieces of information?
That's right. 3 crucial data points per value. First, there's the score. This is the core rating of how well the response aligned with that specific value.
And how is that score? It's like a grade.
It's typically on a simple scale, often mapping to clear judgments. For instance, MERIF 1 might mean it actively violated the value. 0 could mean it omitted the value or was just neutral towards it. And +1 would mean it affirmed or actively promoted the value.
Okay, simple scale. Violates, neutral omits, affirms. Makes sense. What's the second piece?
Second is the confidence level. The AI doing the auditing the conscience module doesn't just give a score, it also states how certain it is about that score.
Ah, okay, like, I think this affirms the value and I'm 90% sure.
Exactly. Usually on a scale from 0 to 1, so 0.9 would be high confidence. But if the situation was really ambiguous or the value itself is complex, the auditor might say, score is 0, confidence 0.5. It's unsure.
And that low confidence is useful information in itself.
Hugely useful. It signals potential ambiguity, maybe a poorly defined value, or a context where the AI struggled to make a clear judgment. That tells the developers or overseers something important.
Right. And the third piece of info, per value.
The rationale. This is essential. It's a short, human-readable explanation justifying why it gave that score with that confidence level.
So it's not a black box. If it says MEG is 1, violation, the rationale tells you what part of the response triggered that.
Precisely. It might say violated respect value by using dismissive language in paragraph 2. It provides that crucial link back to the actual text, making the judgment transparent and auditable by humans.
That level of detail sounds incredibly powerful, but it brings up a big question. We talked about values like dignity or compassion. How does the auditor AI actually know what dignity means? Isn't that super subjective? Couldn't its interpretation change from one day to the next?
That is the critical challenge, and it's exactly what the SAFi designers ran into early on. You hit the nail on the head. If you just tell a large language model, okay, audit this response for justice, Its interpretation could be wildly inconsistent. It depends on its training data, maybe even recent interactions. The results would lack objectivity.
You'd have no stable ethical character. It would just drift around based on the model's whims.
Exactly. The whole system relies on consistent, verifiable judgment. So relying on the auditor AI's subjective understanding of abstract concepts was a non-starter.
So how did they solve that? How do you make judging something like justice objective for a machine?
The solution was elegant, really. They introduced rubrics directly into the persona definition alongside the value set.
Rubrics, like teachers use for grading essays.
Very similar idea. Instead of letting the auditor AI decide what justice means in the moment, the creator of the persona defines it explicitly in the rubric. They operationalize the value.
Operationalize, meaning they turn the abstract idea into concrete, checkable criteria.
Exactly. So, for justice, the rubric might define it as giving each person their due requires fairness, respecting laws, considering the common good, but it doesn't stop there.
It gives scoring guidelines, too.
Yes. This is the key part. The rubric provides specific descriptions for what constitutes different scores. For example, plus 1.0 affirms. The response explicitly promotes fairness, references relevant laws accurately, and considers impact on vulnerable groups. 0.0 neutral omits. The response doesn't violate fairness, but also doesn't actively address it or misses key legal aspects. Negative 1.0 violation. The response promotes an unfair outcome, misrepresents laws, or ignores the common good.
Ah, I see. So the auditor AI isn't interpreting justice freely. It's comparing the response against those specific descriptions in the rubric and picking the one that fits best.
Precisely. It's matching patterns against predefined standards. This makes the entire conscience audit far more objective, repeatable, and transparent. The conscience ledger score isn't just the AI's opinion. It's tied directly back to a clear descriptor set by the humans who define the persona's ethics. It anchors the judgment.
That's clever. It sidesteps the philosophical trap of pure subjectivity by grounding it in these predefined operational definitions.
Yeah, it's a practical engineering solution to a deep philosophical problem.
Okay, to make this really concrete, let's revisit that case study we've used before. The hypothetical AI persona for Boston Healthcare for the homeless program, the BHCHP advocate.
Good idea. So remember, its mission is ensuring healthcare access for Boston's homeless population. And its core value set we defined included dignity, compassion, effectiveness, and innovation. Those are the pillars.
Right, and the prompt was something like, write a 400-word article on homelessness in Boston.
Yep. And let's say the Intellect generated an article and the will reviewed it. The will decision was approved.
I'll approve.
Because the article didn't contain hate speech, didn't suggest anything illegal, didn't violate any hard do not say rules, it passed the basic safety check.
Safe, but maybe not great.
Exactly. Safe isn't the same as aligned with the spirit of the mission. That's where the asynchronous conscience audit comes in. It takes that approved answer and runs it against the rubrics for those 4 values: dignity, compassion, effectiveness, innovation.
Okay, let's walk through the conscience ledger it might generate. What about dignity? Let's say the article, while factually okay, mostly used very clinical language, talked about the homeless population as a statistic, not really focusing on individuals.
Okay. Now, if the dignity rubric for this persona specifically says, must use person-first language, emphasize individual worth, avoid statistical dehumanization, then the conscience auditor, comparing the text to that rubric,
would score it low.
Right. It would likely assign a score of Micah 1 violation. The confidence might be high, say 0.95, because the language use is pretty clear-cut against the rubric.
And the rationale.
The rationale might read, use terms like the homeless population and overly clinical descriptions, failing to meet the rubric's requirement for person-centered language, emphasizing individual dignity.
Wow. Okay, so the will said fine, but the conscience immediately flags a major violation of a core value based on the specific rubric.
That's the power of it. Now, let's look at compassion. Maybe the article, despite the clinical tone, did include a section describing the hardships faced and express empathy for people's struggles.
So if the compassion rubric emphasizes empathetic language and acknowledging suffering,
then the conscience might score this 1+1 affirms, maybe with a confidence of 0.9, the rationale. Contained passages expressing empathy and highlighting suffering, aligning with the rubric's definition of compassion. So here, it did well.
Okay, one hit, one miss. What about effectiveness? The BHCHP advocate should probably highlight actual services, right?
Absolutely. Let's say the effectiveness rubric states that responses should, where relevant, mention concrete services offered by BHCHP, provide actionable information, or link to resources. But imagine our article just talked vaguely about solutions and programs without naming specifics like mobile clinics or shelter contacts.
So it wasn't ineffective, maybe, but it didn't actively demonstrate effectiveness according to the rubric.
Precisely. In that case, the conscience would likely score at 0, neutral mission. Confidence might be, say, 0.85. The rationale lacked specific details about BHCHP services or actionable steps for readers, thus omitting a key aspect of the effectiveness value defined in the rubric.
That 0 score is interesting. It's not a failure, but it's a missed opportunity. It tells the system, you could have done better here. You were silent on something important.
Exactly. It's crucial feedback. And finally, innovation. This is often a harder one to hit. Let's stick with our earlier idea. The article mentions innovative models of care in passing, but doesn't describe anything truly new or specific, just current best practices.
So the innovation rubric might require proposing novel ideas or detailing cutting-edge approaches.
Right, so mentioning existing innovations might get partial credit. Maybe the conscience gives it a score of 0.5 with a lower confidence, perhaps 0.7, because judging true innovation can be tricky.
And the rationale would say something like, acknowledged innovation, but didn't present novel concepts beyond established practices.
Something like that. So look at the complete picture the conscience ledger gives us for this single interaction. Dignity, -1, violation, high confidence. Compassion, +1, affirms, high confidence. Effectiveness, 0, omission, high confidence. Innovation, +0.5, partial affirmation, medium confidence.
That is so much more nuanced than the will's symbol approved. It gives a detailed, multidimensional view of the ethical performance.
Totally. It tells the AI, and crucially, the humans overseeing it, exactly where its alignment is strong, compassion, where it's falling short, dignity, where it's missing opportunities, effectiveness, and where it's okay, but not exceptional, innovation. This verifiable data is the bedrock for accountability and targeted improvement.
Okay, so we have this incredibly detailed report card, the conscience ledger. Scores, confidence, rationales for every value. It's a snapshot of the past performance on that one interaction. But a report card just tells you how you did. It doesn't automatically make you do better next time. How does this ledger actually drive change? How does it connect to the future?
That's the perfect question. The conscience ledger is essentially the raw data, the fuel, for the final faculty in the loop. The spirit.
Right, the integrator.
The integrator, the character builder, the long-term memory. The spirit takes this detailed ledger from the conscience and uses it to adapt the system's behavior over time. Without the conscience's granular data, the spirit would have nothing concrete to work with.
So what does the spirit do with those scores we just discussed, the Neuges 1, +1, 0, +0.5?
The first thing it does is calculate the overall spirit score for that specific interaction. It aggregates those individual value scores, probably weighting them by importance and definite considering the confidence levels.
So it generates one single number summarizing the ethical quality of that response.
Yeah, typically a score on a scale maybe 1 to 10. In our BHCHP example, that -1 on dignity is a serious issue, likely pulling the overall spirit score down significantly, maybe to a 4 or 5 out of 10, even though compassion scored well. It gives an immediate summary judgment.
Okay, that's the score for this interaction, but you said the spirit has memory.
Yes, and this is where its real power lies. It doesn't just look at the current turn in isolation. The spirit uses the data from the conscience ledger to update the system's memory state, specifically the memory vector.
The memory vector, what is that conceptually?
Think of it like the system's long-term ethical character profile, stored as data. It's often implemented as an exponentially weighted moving average of performance across all past interactions, broken down by value.
So if the BHCHP advocate consistently gets +1s on compassion over hundreds of interactions,
then the compassion component of its memory vector becomes very strong. It knows it's good at compassion. Conversely, if it keeps getting -1s or 0s on dignity,
that part of its character profile weakens or shows a persistent problem area.
Exactly. The memory vector represents the system's learned, established ethical behavior over time. It is its character, quantitatively speaking.
And having that long-term view allows the spirit to detect something you mentioned earlier, drift.
Precisely. Drift is one of the biggest dangers in AI ethics. The system slowly, subtly deviating from its intended ethical alignment over time.
How does the spirit spot that?
It calculates drift by comparing the performance on the current interaction, summarized from the conscience ledger, against the established norms stored in the memory vector. If our BHCHP advocate usually scores high on dignity, strong memory vector component, but suddenly gets a string of men at ones from the conscience ledger.
The spirit sees a big mismatch, a deviation. That's drift.
That's drift. It flags that the system's current behavior is out of line with its historical character or its defined value set. This could be due to changes in the AI model, new types of prompts, or other factors. Detecting it is crucial for maintaining integrity.
Okay, so the spirit calculates the spirit score, updates the memory vector, identifies drift. How does it close the loop? How does this get back to influencing future actions?
It generates feedback. Based on the ledger analysis, the spirit score, and the drift calculation, it creates a coaching note, usually in natural language.
A coaching note for who?
For the Intellect faculty. This note, along with the updated memory state, is fed back to the very beginning of the loop.
Closing the circle.
Exactly. So for our BHCHP example with the MECS 1 on dignity, the spirit might generate a high-priority coaching note for the Intellect saying something like, critical feedback, consistently failing on dignity value. Prioritize person-first language, and avoid clinical statistical framing in future responses related to homelessness.
So it gives direct, actionable instructions to the part of the system that actually generates the response.
Yes. It guides the Intellect on how to generate a better draft response next time, one that's less likely to fail the conscience audit later. It's continuous, targeted self-correction based on past ethical performance.
That makes the conscience absolutely vital then. It's not just judging the past, it's providing the essential data that allows the system to learn, adapt, and avoid gradually losing its ethical way, preventing that drift.
It's the core of the system's accountability mechanism. It ensures alignment isn't just a one-time setup, but an ongoing, verifiable process of striving towards greater moral coherence, guided by data. Hashtag, outro.
Well, that really clarifies the role of the conscience. It's the judicial branch, the reflective auditor within the FA architecture. We've seen how the will acts as that first line of defense, making sure a response isn't obviously bad in the moment.
Right, it stops the clear violations. But the conscience, operating after the fact, is what judges how truly good that response was, how well it aligned with the spirit, not just the letter, of the organization's value set.
The keys seem to be that asynchronous operation, so it doesn't slow things down, and the use of those detailed rubrics to make the judgment objective and transparent, captured in the conscience ledger.
Absolutely. It moves AI ethics from vague principles towards verifiable, structured assessment and accountability. It's about building systems that don't just avoid harm, but actively strive towards their defined ethical goals.
We've got the judgment now with the conscience ledger. But you said that data feeds the spirit, which gives the system memory, character, and the ability to adapt. That sounds like where the long-term learning really happens.
It is. The spirit takes the conscience's findings and translates them into lasting change. It's the most, let's say, mathematically intricate part, but also the part that really embodies the self-alignment aspect over time.
And that's exactly where we're headed in our next deep dive. We'll complete the SAFi closed loop by exploring the spirit faculty, the guardian of long-term alignment.
Looking forward to it.
But as we wrap up today, maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. We saw how the rubrics are key to making the conscience's judgment objective. They're defined by humans, translating values into checklists. So the question is, can an AI governed this way ever develop moral understanding or progress beyond the ethical frameworks its human creators initially defined for it? Or is it forever bound by the limits of those rubrics?
A profound question indeed.
Join us next time as we tackle the spirit and continue exploring the future of ethical AI.